Well, hello everyone. My name is Brendan Ciecko and I'm the founder of Cuseum. First off, I want to say thank you to everyone who is joining us today, our speakers, our attendees. Over 3,000 people have registered for today's conversation, and I look forward to this dialogue. If you're joining us for the first time, welcome. And for those of you who have tuned into any of our past webinars or conversations, welcome back. It's great to see you again. Back in May, when we hosted a webinar on monetizing digital content, museums and cultural organizations were only just beginning to experiment with new ways to generate revenue through digital programs. And now, several months later, we've seen a surge of exciting initiatives that are bringing in money for these organizations, from virtual summer camps, ticketed virtual events, animal cameos to online classes. Cultural institutions have launched a range of digital projects that are serving as new revenue streams. And for several years, we've been researching this topic. Back in 2016, we put out an article titled New Revenue Streams for Museum in the Digital Age. And I just have to say, wow, how the world has changed since that time. We conceived this session because we wanted to showcase all of these incredible, timely new initiatives and provide a forum for all of us to exchange new ideas, facilitate a new conversation, and have a feedback session that will hopefully be inspiring and helpful for some new projects as we think about these at our host organization. So really excited that this has come together with 6 panelists working on creative initiatives that are helping drive new revenue streams at their institutions. And for this lightning talk format today, we'll start out with some brief introductions, and then we'll give each panelist the chance to share what they've been working on. And for the latter half of the webinar, we'll have an open discussion, Q&A, and a feedback session where we can chat through all of the new projects we're about to hear about. So without further ado, please let me introduce our special guests. So joining us from Carnegie Museums, we have Kara Fikse, is the Assistant Director of Philanthropic Engagement and Stewardship at Carnegie Museums of Pittsburgh. She's been a part of advancement and community engagement team for almost 3 years, and prior to Pittsburgh, she worked in public programming for the Smithsonian. Thank you so much for joining us, Kara.
Happy to be here.
Thanks, Kara. And joining us, we have Joshua Rupp, Director of Events at the Lincoln Park Zoo. Joshua is the Director of Events at Lincoln Park Zoo, where he helps to organize and produce over 240 events per year. And before Lincoln Park Zoo, Joshua held roles at Live Nation, Viacom CBS, and the Moscow Ballet. Thanks for joining us, Joshua.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you guys having me.
Thank you. And I love the mix of music and entertainment and ballet in your background. That's super
You had
cool.
to mention that.
Just had to. Excellent. And joining us from Boston, we have Katie Mayshak, the Deputy Director of Development at the Institute of Contemporary Art Boston, the ICA, who's been there for the last 9 years. During her tenure, the ICA has completed consecutive campaigns exceeding $100 million, nearly doubled its annual operating budget, and opened a new satellite location, the ICA Watershed, in my home neighborhood of East Boston. I'm an East Boston resident, so I appreciate and love ICA's involvement in the community I live in. Thank you so much for joining us, Katie.
Happy to be here. Thanks, Brendan.
Thank you. And we have Emily Moody, who is the managing events and program producer at the Cummer Museum of Art and Gardens, the largest fine art museum in Northeast Florida. Thanks for joining us, Emily.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And also Sharon McRorie, who has been the education programs manager at the Asheville Art Museum for over 19 years. In this position, she engaged with children and families, both on-site and off-site, with meaningful creative experiences. Sharon has created most of the hands-on programming for children and families over the last 2 decades, most recently redesigning the traditional summer art camp program to be completely virtual. Thanks for joining us, Sharon, and we can't wait to hear about this program.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And joining us from Arizona, we have McKenna Nischke, who has been the digital communication specialist at the Phoenix Zoo for the last year and a half. She studied public relations at the University of Wisconsin, Oshkosh, and has been immersed in the world of social media since 2015. Thanks, McKenna. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And I have to just give a shout out as the father of a 20-month-old, big fan of Oshkosh Bagosh, which I think is from Oshkosh. Is that it? Okay, it is from awesome. Lastly, Brendan Ciecko, I'm the founder and CEO of Cuseum. I'll be your host for today's conversation about generating revenue streams through digital content and virtual experiences. So we're gonna pass the microphone over to Kara from Carnegie Museums to tell us a little bit about some of the work you're doing in this area, some of your new programming, and its relationship to generating digital revenue.
Sure. Hi, everyone. To give a bird's eye view of sort of the variety of offerings across the museums in the virtual world, for members and donors, we have a variety of virtual events with different curators, scientific staff, collection managers, etc. And the ways that we're bringing in money through those events is through a text-to-give platform, not a super high earner for us, really easy and cheap to put together, so why not? We also have an option for members to tack on an additional donation to their free registration for these events. It's an idea we actually got from the Denver Museum of Nature and Science, so thanks to their staff, because this has been a great tool for us, really consistent, and we've seen new faces in the world of philanthropy and philanthropic giving, so that's been exciting for us. And then the third way, we're experimenting with offering non-members tickets to these members-only events. So depending on the event, it will be a different ticket price, but usually in the realm of $7 to $10. And we are looking at it as a way to kind of see if we could leverage it for acquisition purposes, what kind of content might be of particular interest to bring in new members into the fold. And then the museums are also offering ticketed summer camps, classes, different program series. And then the one I wanted to highlight is a series for donors that my colleague Barbara Tucker has spearheaded, but it's our virtual curated travel program. As everyone knows, traveling has been grounded. So she pivoted her usual offerings of going on trips around the US and around the world into virtual offerings. So they've ranged from French cooking classes, other types of cooking classes with Italian chefs. I think they're going to learn how to make some Irish tea time cookies in the next couple weeks. Also lectures with different curators. One of the upcoming ones is with a curator from Amsterdam talking about Van Gogh. And then we've also looked in-house and used some of our curators to take folks on virtual journeys. Our Egyptologist went to Egypt, or they took people to Egypt. And then our curator of architecture did the same thing with Venice. So a really creative series that has kept that group engaged while they can't go on their traditional trips. So I think that's it for me. Did I make it in 3 minutes?
I think so. Thank you for sharing that. And I just want to say that I was really inspired by, stumbling upon the virtual curated travel program and some of the research that we were doing on this area. And I saw Hooray for Souffle, and I saw, and I acknowledge that travel is probably one of those things that so much of us are missing right now in general, and any form of escapism and any form of bringing us and transporting us to new places is really an exciting opportunity. So I was really thrilled to see that the Carnegie Museums was doing that, and doing that in a collaborative way, where if even for a split moment you feel like you're in Paris or Egypt, I think that's an unbelievable achievement. So kudos to you and your team. on all of that. And thanks for sharing that with us so far. So up next at bat, we have Joshua. Can you tell us a little bit about some of your meet and greets and other programs that you're doing at the Lincoln Park Zoo?
Yeah, sure. From us, we had a decision to make when all this started happening. We can either sit back and just kind of see what happens with our department and our jobs and our roles at the institution, or we can kind of flip. And so one of the questions that's coming in to the Q&A was something about revenue and ROI that strongly came into our consideration of doing these virtual events. And if we'd get 30 people or if we'd get 10 people, for us, it didn't matter. We just wanted to show our value. So for us, we started exploring low-cost virtual programs at the zoo, specifically to engage with our audience and rally behind our conservation messaging. And some of those programs that we were exploring directly correlate to our mission, while the others were a bit of a reach. And I think that's fine, specifically because we've always tried to just produce things in the most unique and exciting way. And I think that's what really helps diversify a lot of our audiences across the live events that we used to do and the virtual events that we're currently doing now. So since May, we went from a team of 4 to a team of 2. So since May, myself and Nicole, our event manager, we've produced and launched virtual happy hours, Zumba classes, running events, magic shows, history tours, gardening tutorials. We also are getting ready to host children's campouts, virtual big truck construction project show and tells, sing-alongs, speed dating, and then one of the things that we've learned along the process is, we're seeing large spikes in attendance in our virtual meet and greet events, which is something that you just alluded to. This is an event that we've been producing since May. It's been happening every other Saturday. It typically features the same format. It starts with a host who introduces and throws to somebody else, and then they introduce an animal. It's hosted by our learning team, and then they throw to a curator. It's very similar to a cameo type of experience, but the effort is we put in the effort and we take 100% of the revenue, so there's no split on the partnership. And we've been sending out surveys for all events that we do, the live and the virtual events, and we typically, as I'm sure everyone on the meeting knows, that you see a very small percentage of response rates. For our virtual events, we're seeing like 30 to 50% response, which is great. And on average, we're seeing a 98% satisfaction rate across all of the virtual programs. And we try to keep them consistent. We pricing and timing, we average about $15 per ticket for our virtual events, and timing kind of fluctuates as well, but typically for a family-friendly audience, we stay around 10 a.m. and for more adult-centric, we go 5 p.m. plus. But we've seen a big spike on the strictly very heavily centric mission-based programming like meet and greets, where we are featuring an animal and talking specifically about the education behind that animal and the conservation in the wild. Those are the type of events that we're seeing a high success rate at.
Thank you for sharing that, Joshua. And I'm really excited to see or sense the level of kind of data-driven nature of your organization through, it being 98% satisfaction rate, which is an incredible achievement any way you slice and dice it. But I love that you're taking these different aspects into consideration around return on investment, ways of quantifying the impact that they're having in your community through the surveys. So really excited to learn about that. And next up, we have Katie from the ICA in Boston. Katie, can you tell us a little bit about some of the things the ICA is doing right now?
Sure. So the ICA is mounting a broad spectrum of virtual programming that really up until this point has largely been free and open to the public. Talks with artists, a lot of social programming. We've translated programming like First Fridays and Sunday DJ brunches to virtual programs that stream live on Instagram. I was asked specifically to speak about our recent virtual gala, which ironically was offered as free and open to the public. About 7,000 people attended, but it in fact was an important revenue generator for the museum in our fiscal year that actually closed the day that we mounted the gala on June 30th. The ICA Boston closed in mid-March, and that happened to be just about 4 weeks before we were to host our annual gala honoring 2 artists Sterling Ruby and Virgil Abloh, two high-profile artists and designers that were back-to-back on our calendar, and we had generated quite a lot of excitement and revenue to support the museum through this event, which was to be a seated dinner with a lot of performance and some sparkly guest speakers and artists coming in for about 450 people. And our conundrum when the museum closed and we knew we would have to either suspend the event hosted at a much later date or cancel it altogether, our challenge was how to retain the revenue and sort of excite in a compelling way both the artists that were involved in the program and also all of our amazing sponsors. So we translated almost the full spectrum of the program that we had planned for our April event into a virtual program. It was a pre-recorded conversation between Virgil and Sterling. It was bookended by introductions and tributes by the artist Arthur Jaffa, as well as the journalist Kathy Horn, and performances by Grammy Award-winning band that Brendan, I probably should have mentioned earlier to you when you were asking, called Tank and the Bangas, and another Serpent with Feet. So we were able to weave into that program introductions by members of our ICA Teen Arts Council to really kind of take advantage of having a captive audience of fans of the artists and many of the performers that tuned in for the live cast to kind of really message and impart the importance of our mission and programs, and also, of course, comments by our director, Jill Medvedow. One of the most compelling things about our decision to one of the most successful things about our decision to translate to a virtual program that we knew would have a big following because of, in part, Virgil Abloh's immense social media following, was that our donors were excited about the idea that a program that would have just been for 300 or 400 guests that evening was able to be shared globally with, again, over 7,000 audience members. So in the end, we were successful in retaining just about 100% of the revenue for the gala. So it was, it wound up being kind of the most successful fundraiser we never had at the museum. It's an interesting turn of events.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that, Katie. And, being a Bostonian and being supportive of the ICA, I was really excited to see this come together as something that was open and free for the public. So I know how important community engagement is for the ICA. And, we've been thinking a lot about this and having a lot of conversations with organizations across the globe around the role that galas and fundraising events play. And, these events often raise, depending on what size of an organization you are, they raise thousands or even millions of dollars, and much needed financial support each and every year. And so, we started hearing about, kind of almost facetiously, from some people saying, oh, maybe we'll do a virtual gala, and some people going, well, how can you do that? It's never been done. What does that look like? What does that feel like? And so I was really excited to see the virtual ICA gala. And I mean, there's no more significant a designer today than Virgil Abloh. So I like just seeing the artists that were being honored. And we've taken note that other museums like the National Museum of Dance, the Tenement Museum, and even the Newport Art Museum in Rhode Island have turned to doing virtual galas. I'm sure there's many others, and some have even paired it with dinner that is delivered to your house, or flower arrangements that are delivered to the houses, the homes of donors and patrons. And I just thought it was really, really creative and interesting, and kind of leans into, Boston is a very tech-centered city and an innovative city at that. So to see it take form as this production that the donors and the different levels and sponsors were involved with, I was very curious about what the outcomes were. So it was amazing to hear that it was the most successful gala that you've never had, and the revenue retention was there. I think that is that might set the precedent for virtual galas to come. So thank you so much for sharing that, Katie. Great. And Emily, can you tell us a little bit about what the Cummer Museum is doing right now?
Hey, everybody. So our events and programs team, we've really, I'm sure like all of you, remained dedicated to planning great events, but we've just obviously shifted that over to more virtual platform. We are fortunate to partner with the University of Florida professor of art history, Dr. Scott Brown, and he led a series of 3 talks that were coined the lockdown lectures. And these were great. They were free, open to anyone. They highlighted different artists or work in our permanent collection. So it kept the talk relevant and unique to our museum, which we're really finding to be important during this to staying true to our brand. Although the talks were free, there was still a great value in them because it was great to highlight the works, and then it kept the audience engaged and reached people from around the country and world because they're able to log in through Zoom. So that's not necessarily something we can do with a program that's on site, obviously. So here we are putting out all this content, but we don't really know how to monetize it, and that's where we're still trying to tweak. I know this webinar is about how we've already generated revenue, but one aspect that we're developing is still the monetization part for our programs. I don't know if anyone caught the Culture Track survey that was recently released, but it was a study that was aimed to shed light on how arts and culture organizations can address the hopes, fears, and needs of Americans now and post-pandemic. And if you haven't seen it, you should really check it out. There's some really interesting information, but what I found to be valuable is that out of like 124,000 respondents, only 13% said that they've been paying for online content. So as a whole, it seems people aren't ready to pay for it yet, which is why we're trying to get a little more creative. So we're looking at the programs as more of a growth opportunity for us. We're gathering data from program registrants. We're surveying the participants, like I'm sure a lot of you are, for feedback, quotes, more data that can be plugged into applications, impact reports, grant applications, future funding opportunities. So to help offset the costs currently, our development team is now seeking special sponsorships, underwriters for some of our various programs. While there might not be a flat ticket price for the content, the programs help us provide a new kind of alternate revenue stream that wouldn't have been there before. And then the museum's intellectual capital, which we feel is really invaluable for future programs and future funding. Our current program plan right now for going into fall is pretty fluid because we're in Florida, which is currently one of the many hotspots around the country, but we just from day to day don't really know what's going to be happening. So we've created plans that are a little bit more hybrid, some on-site, some people can log in off-site, offering members free, paid tickets for non-members. We're just currently trying to tweak and figure out what works best for us, but we're also developing a series of virtual tours of our exhibitions where we plan to package and sell to various groups that would normally come in for a tour and a luncheon. Since they can't do that in person currently, the package price would be like a brief live welcome from our curator, and then a pre-recorded virtual tour of an exhibition, and then a meal delivered from our cafe that would just be in one ticket price. So even though we're not currently bringing in revenue from virtual content, it might prove to be a little bit more in the future.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Emily. And I know that some of the work of the Cummer Museum came onto our radar through the virtual cooking classes that the museum was hosting. And it's really interesting to learn that you'll be packaging programming where, food is a component of that. We've seen a number of museums leap into cooking classes that were either, tied to an exhibition or to the, cultural identity of the organization. So it was really nice to hear about that from you, and also that no one has the answers right now. It's all about experimenting and iterating, and what works for the Carnegie Museum might not work for the Cummer Museum. What works for the ICA might not work for Asheville Art Museum. It's really going to be dependent on your community and the demographic of your audience and kind of the relationship you have with your community. So that all said, I want to also give a shout out alongside you to La Placa Cohen that puts out the Culture Track. We posted a link in the chat. A lot of people were asking about that, so I'm so happy that you bring that up, Emily. So I think that there's a lot of nuggets of knowledge and wisdom in that report that can be truly helpful for organizations as they try to figure out what they should charge for, what should be pay what you wish, what should be, you know, free, and what the consumer attitudes towards paying for virtual content are. So I'm super happy that you referenced that. Great. And Sharon, can you share a little bit about your work with summer camps in general and then virtual summer camps? What does that transition look like? What's your journey look like? We'd love to learn more.
Yes, when we closed on March 18th, we have been taking reservations for our traditional summer art camp, which we host each year. And at that point, we had already reached capacity for some of our camps. So by mid-April, we realized that we were going to have to switch gears, and we created Summer Art Camp to Go. And up to that point, we had not hosted any programs geared towards children and families. All of our live virtual programs was geared toward adults. I mean, there were artist conversations and we had one adult studio class that was a paid program. But all of our museum from home content was just on our website, available for folks to use on their own without any interaction from museum staff. So we were jumping into uncharted territory, and we were hoping that, you know, summer camp students and their caregivers would be receptive to switching to Summer Art Camp to Go, but we really had no idea. Traditionally, we offer Summer Art Camp to rising kindergarten through 12th grade students each year for 7 weeks, 14 sessions that are traditionally taught by contract educators. So we decided to keep the basic structure the same, but only offer 1 session per week. The price went down slightly, but we had to account for each student getting their own set of materials rather than sharing materials like they would in person. And each weekly session includes an art kit with all of the materials for each project, links to pre-recorded demos, and weekly sessions that include daily Zoom sessions. Zoom classes are up to 1 hour for kindergarten through 5th grade students and up to 2 hours for 6th through 12th grade students. Traditionally, we have a fair number of scholarship students, so we know that not all students have the same access to technology, so we also created written instructions that students and their caregivers could follow along even if they're not able to, you know, join us in the Zoom session or have access to the video demos. We gave all the students who were already registered for Summer Art Camp the option to switch to Art Camp to Go first. And within about a week, we had enough students switch that we were able to schedule the first 3 weeks of classes. And so I, along with 2 of my colleagues, switched pretty much our focus to Summer Art Camp to Go, creating all the content, creating all the demos, and putting together all the kits. And then by the first week of camp, which was June 15th, we had enough students registered for 5 weeks of sessions. And now we have enough students registered for 6 weeks of sessions. So we had to cancel 1 week of sessions because we didn't have enough enrollment, but we were able to switch those students into another session. So nobody really lost out. And at this point, all of that content that we've created, the 6 weeks of content for all these different age groups, we are trying to figure out how we can repurpose that into programs for the fall, whether they're workshops or weekly sessions or standalone art kits. All of that kind of thing is up in the air right now, but we're hoping that we could repurpose some of it because it was pretty labor intensive for staff to create.
Great. Well, thank you so much for sharing that, Karen. And I feel really strongly that you were taking an early look at some of the tech gap and access issues in your community and taking a proactive, approach to addressing those. And I see from the chat dialogue that many people feel very similarly that that's the way to go for these types of programs. So thank you for sharing that with us. And it seems like the program has been, very successful given the, unpredictability of this moment in time. So I know that there's a lot of museums exploring and experimenting with virtual summer camps and virtual courses. So it was really great to hear about what you're doing at the Asheville Art Museum. And I hope that there will be more conversations about what are some of the best practices around virtual summer camps. And so our last lightning talk story for today's webinar before we shift into Q&A and questions comes from McKenna. Can you tell us about what you're up to at the Phoenix Zoo?
Yeah, so when we initially had to close our doors in March, we were losing a lot of revenue because that is our busiest time of year. So we were looking for different ways to make money because as a nonprofit, we rely on our donors, our sponsors, and the revenue of kids coming in from schools. And so we came across Cameo, which is a video messaging service, usually for celebrities, but now a lot of zoos and aquariums are on there too. So you can get messages from animals, which is really cool. And we actually have our sloth, our flamingos, stingrays, and we usually have our giraffe, but they are currently offline right now. And we were able to raise over $10,000 during our initial closure, and $8,500 of that came from Fernando himself, which is really cool. And Cameo actually reached out to us to make one for Kristen Bell, and we had a marriage proposal. We even had some kids that wanted to say thank you to their teachers for switching to the online platform because they weren't able to say thank you at the end of the school year to their teachers in person. So it's been a really neat way to connect with people because they can't come to the zoo, but we're helping them connect to their families, their friends, and their loved ones in a virtual way, which is really cool. And we have had to close our doors again. So my goal is to use Cameo as a way for parents to say, good luck at this next school year, like you're transitioning to college, or happy birthday messages, those kinds of things, which I'm really excited about using Cameo again.
Awesome. Well, congratulations on that. That's really exciting. I remember, first seeing some of the interesting work that zoos were doing with virtual animal cameos, like the Elmwood Park Zoo, which we had in a webinar, and the guests from the museum actually brought all of the several thousand guests of the webinar to the giraffes, which was kind of the most amazing webinar experience I've ever been a part of. I mean, I've never been on a webinar with giraffes. I don't know if anyone has. And it just was amazing to see what, zoos are doing, especially the Phoenix Zoo. And in my mind, hearing the word animal cameo was one thing, and it hadn't dawned on me until recently that you're actually using Cameo, which is like if I want to wish a friend a happy birthday with like Tony Hawk, I can make something like that happen. But the dynamic of involving zoos and aquariums is a new frontier, and it's exciting that you're riding a really powerful wave and momentum of people's desires for special experiences. And so that's really cool. I'm curious, the thing about Kristen Bell, is that with the Phoenix Zoo, or is that just in general?
So Cameo sent us a request, and so one day I was just like scrolling through looking at all of the cameos that we had to fulfill for that day, and I was like, oh, Kristen Bell, and they had requested one to send to her who loves sloths so much, and it's just like hey, hope you're doing okay. We hope that once all of this is over and it's safe to do so, you can come out and meet Fernando, because we do offer backstage adventures with our animals too. So she can come and meet Fernando in person if she would like to. So
you guys Cameo sent a cameo to Kristen Bell?
Yep.
That's so clever. That's really super cool. Well, awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I know a lot of people in the chat are equally excited about things like this and are asking about Cameo and how it works. So hopefully we'll have some time to dive a little bit deeper into that. But I think all of your stories are a testament to, when you're faced with new challenges, when you're faced with uncertainty, you need to, roll with the punches and explore new avenues. So was really inspired by each and every one of your stories, and look forward to jumping into some Q&A so we dive a little bit deeper. But before we jump into the Q&A, I just want to share an article, a post that came out today in AAM that we wrote that highlights a lot of the different ways to create digital revenue streams, and it's chock full of examples. So we write about, I think, each and every one of the examples that you've heard about today. We write about when exploring, you know, all of the different ways, you know, how do you charge? Do you charge for special online events? How do you introduce virtual membership levels? How do you develop virtual courses and summer camps? Plan an online fundraiser or gala, and explore, you know, the pay what you want model for your program. So we've been keeping an eye on this and started researching this. And so if you're looking for a couple more examples or case studies, definitely check out that piece on AAM, and let me post a link to that if you're interested in reading more of some of those stories. So let's talk. You know, let's dive a little bit. Let's dive a little bit into some questions. And you know, when museums and organizations first closed their doors to the public, the primary concern was how to keep audiences engaged. We know most were hesitant to put content behind a paywall. And now, months later, as cultural organizations adjust to the new normal and are looking for ways to generate revenue, many organizations are experimented with paid digital events and digital program. If you've only been offering free virtual program up until now, what do you think are some of the best ways to transition to charging for it?
I can jump in with like a yet to be totally tested example of kind of the way that we're thinking about it at the ICA. We have been primarily offering free programming, as you know, Brendan, up until this point, but we're starting to introduce programs, you know, beginning, I believe this week, that are ticketed but free to members, as I know many places are doing. And one of the ways that we've been sort of smoothing that transition and kind of readying our audiences for that transition is by unearthing sort of signature programming that maybe has been suspended for a little while or is seasonal during the summer. So it's something that is familiar to our audiences that has traditionally been free to members, ticketed for non-members. We're experimenting with a food seems to be a theme on this panel, and we have a program called Talking Taste that we will kind of revamp for our local Boston friends. You may remember it as a program that we ran at the museum for years and years, launched with the opening of the new ICA, you know, over a decade ago, and had a bit of a cult following. It would be a sort of celebrity chef would do a live cooking demonstration on our grandstand outdoors, free to members and ticketed for others. So we'll see how that goes. But that line of thinking, you know, kind of leaning into the familiar and you know, making sure that there is accessibility certainly for our members is a strategy.
Excellent, thank you for that. And Kara, I'd love to hear from you on that note, you know, around, you know, your team's role and your team's experimentation around charging for some of these virtual programs. And I know that you have ticketed virtual events, you have, you know, members only virtual events, and you also have virtual curated travel programs. What was kind of the journey internally? Were there brainstorming sessions? Was it, we're going to experiment and see what works? I'd love to hear kind of what that journey looked like from the beginning to where you are right now.
Sure. So events are built into our member benefits. So it is something that we love to offer, but we also have to offer. So it was also a way, as you mentioned, to sort of a stopgap measure while we were closed, because the free admission is a huge selling point for our memberships, and being able to come to the museums for free with your family. So we definitely had that in mind, is how we can sort of bring the museums to people when they can't visit. So in terms of deciding what was going to be ticketed, what was free, it was conversations with the museums. Like I said, they provide a lot of content on their own. So if it made sense to have it be more of a public program that we promote to members specifically, or there's an add-on feature that's just for members, whether that's a Q&A or early registration or early access. So we're always kind of turning to this menu of add-on options that may not be a whole separate event for members, but are a little special something for them with the public programming. With the free member events that we're offering, like I said, that was basically pivoting from what we traditionally offered on-site and bringing that to the virtual platform. It's been a really great way for us to kind of tease out different content than we otherwise would be able to in an on-site experience, and also bring forth some different curators, some different staff members that aren't usually out in the galleries or in the exhibitions. Some of our like our engineers and conservationists and staff that are working a little more behind the scenes. So if it was an event that we thought that would traditionally be an on-site event, that was definitely just part of the free offerings. And then in terms of deciding what events are going to be have tickets for non-members, that is also a conversation with the various museums. And like I said, for us, it's an experiment to see sort of what content we might be able to use for acquisition, and to some of our sort of blockbuster events or curators or subject topics that we know are sort of amongst our best sellers for members, to see if that will translate over into getting some ticket sales in the amongst non-members. So, and then the virtual curated travel program, ticket price depends on what the offering is. So for some of the cooking classes, it's around $125 or so. For some of the lectures, it's $20. But I think we're exploring still with outside speakers, outside talent, if you will. And I think that's really for us the big difference between how we can maybe ask for money or ask for or put a ticket price to these events is when we're sort of bringing in an additional element or special guest speaker or something along those lines that is really sort of above and beyond what our fulfilling our benefits is. So
thank you. And we hosted a similar conversation last week, more geared towards membership, a membership lightning talk. But we think one of these questions is worth revisiting here. How do you get internal buy-in for new projects and move them to the finish line? We're lucky to have a range of institutions represented on this webinar in terms of size. So we're excited to hear from all of you in the context of the particular challenges you might face when you're looking to, evangelize an idea or experiment with pricing, whether there's a tight budget or administrative hurdles. So I'd love to hear from, Joshua on your side, because it sounds like, again, you're looking at ROI, you're looking at metrics. I'd love to hear what you're doing and what your teams are doing to get buy-in internally for some of these new projects.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, the zoo, like you mentioned, Lincoln Park Zoo is a very data-driven institution, and we make all of our decisions based on science, which is extremely beneficial to work at a place like this. We do a lot of surveys, a lot of research data, and it's certainly helpful for the events world. For us, when all this started, I think I went to Nicole, my event manager, and said, yeah, this is going to be over in a couple weeks. Just hang in there. It'll all be fine. And then weeks turned into months and months and months and months and months. So in the beginning, it was kind of like, okay, well, we're doing this. Let's just flip it to a hybrid model, or let's flip it to something different. And it progressed into doing just straight virtual events. And the buy-in was extremely hard, specifically because I've been at the zoo for about 8 years now. And I don't, like you mentioned before, I don't have a background in zoos. I have a background in music and entertainment, specifically at Live Nation and iHeartRadio and MTV networks. My goal is to just produce something that's fun, exciting, and engaging. My hope is that you have such a good time at the zoo that you want to come back with your partner, your friend, or your family, and then you'll become a member, you'll buy something at retail, but you come back because you had such a good time at our beer festival or our magic show. So as you can imagine, being a data-driven, conservation-minded institution, the buy-in is extremely hard. From my side, I pitch it in a way of like, some stuff is directly correlated with our mission, and some stuff is very much of a reach. Like an example is a magic show. We work with a lot of local people because we like to support the local talent, specifically because Chicago has a lot of great local talent. But the magic show, we knew it was a great idea. We have a great talent for that programmatic piece. The buy-in came from how does this relate back to the mission of the zoo. We worked with that local talent and curated a program based on scientific data of a specific animal, and then she created a program based on that scientific data. It was a very much of a reach, but it allowed us to engage in a certain topic and still tie it back to the zoo. So the buy-in is hard, specifically when the program is a little bit more of a reach, but we find the little tiny intricate pieces that will allow us to tie it back to the zoo, and specifically say that we're one of the only departments right now making money for the zoo. So the other piece of our mission is educating, but also bringing revenue back into the zoo. And we are doing that through an engaging program.
Thank you for that. And I'm gonna get on gallery mode so we can see everybody, all of the speakers, but raise your hand if you've faced any pushback or needed to get support and buy-in for any of the recent virtual work that you've been doing. Okay, so a little bit, some here, some there. Obviously it is a reality, and I think it's always interesting to hear about the different approaches or different kind of methodologies one can use to get an idea into production. So thank you for sharing that, Joshua. So if Kanye West wanted to perform, or if you wanted Kanye to perform, as long as it's about the mission statement and the science that goes into zoology, you guys are up for it.
I don't know. Kanye might be a stretch.
Might be a stretch. Especially especially.
I don't know if I can figure out the way that can tie back to the zoo.
Me neither. But worth asking. Chicago, brilliant Chicago, native. So open-ended. What are some of the methodologies that you or your organizations are using to assess the success of these virtual events and programs? Are you collecting feedback? Joshua, I know from your side you are collecting feedback, but from everyone else, are you collecting feedback? Are you doing surveys? Sharon, you're shaking your head right now, so I'd love to hear what type of evaluation is taking place.
Yeah, we send surveys out after every single program, and I think, like someone else mentioned, we've had an incredible return on the program evaluations, and they've been overwhelmingly positive. So it's driven us to continue forward, and we know that we're going to continue virtual programs after we open, because of course we're still not open. So
thank you. And Emily, how about at your museum? What type of feedback are you collecting? What type of responses are you getting from your participants, from your community?
We've been doing surveys as well, and people have just been, the responses have been a lot more plentiful than an in-person program. You might get just a couple, but those surveys, very complimentary, very thankful that we're putting on these programs, especially for free. And I think that building that community goodwill definitely has value to it, even though that doesn't have a price point attached to it necessarily, but and like I said before, we can use all of the survey data to really plug into future grants and applications for future funding. So I think that it will be beneficial to us to have this content.
Great, thank you. And what is the long-term outlook for virtual programs and events at your organization? Are you planning to do hybrid on-site and virtual option programs or dedicated digital programs in the long term, or do you see it just as a temporary solution? Katie, how is the ICA looking at this right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, we don't know a lot about what will happen over the next 12 months, but I think it's hard to envision a future where virtual programming is not some part of what we're doing at the museum. I mean, we have seen, as many of you have reported, really positive feedback from the virtual programming that we've mounted so far. We are planning a virtual calendar for the fall. And going forward, I think, obviously we're an art museum. We do a lot of performance, a lot of work with young people and families on site. Our hope is to be able to begin to reintroduce some of those on-site programs soon. But certainly I think there's a lot of opportunity for virtual programming to be augmentative. When we put so much into mounting the program for our gala that was to take place as an event, again, just to serve a few hundred people, and it was a real eye-opening experience to be able to share that program with many thousands at the end of the day. So I think at the ICA, we're still experimenting, still learning, still building our team. We have a virtual content team that's led sort of cross-departmentally at the ICA, and I think our goal is to continue to ramp that up and build that muscle and use this work to reach a broader audience.
Great, thank you for that. And Kara, I'd love to hear from you on that standpoint, because I imagine a lot of the content that your museum is creating is so high quality and a lot of effort into crafting, some of those items, especially the virtual curated travel program. I wonder if that's something that, the travel industry, I know there's a lot in question about the future of travel and what that looks like. And so, does something like that become a facet of the programming that your museum does, in the future, in perpetuity?
Well, I have built in a Zoom webinar license into my budget for 2021. So, I think it is now definitely part of our long-term strategy for engagement. Initially, I think like many of us, it was sort of a Band-Aid, but now we've seen a ton of value in this content and some surprising value to it. So it is definitely part of, I think, going to be part of our mix going forward with on-site engagement as well. But it's I strayed off the question was about long-term.
If this will become like a long-term part of your program strategy, not just like a temporary thing, but okay. Awesome.
Yes. So it definitely will be. And I think it will, like I said, be a mix with on-site events, but it's definitely here to stay for the long term for us.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. So we only have a couple minutes left, and I want to mention that after this webinar, we're going to compile everyone's questions, ideas, and solutions into one living and breathing document to share with the museum community. Feel free to share your thoughts here in the webinar chat or email them over to hello@cuseum.com. One thing that I want to say for those attending from all over the globe to be here with us today is feel free to post right now. Feel free to post or shameless plug any virtual programming that you're doing right now that you're monetizing or thinking of monetizing. We're always looking for examples, and I know the community is also looking for examples. And by seeing that, a sculpture park in New York did X. If I'm a sculpture park in California, I might want to reach out and ask how that program went. If I'm a zoo in Arizona and I see a zoo in Chicago has done a certain thing, we really, believe in those bonds that, happen through seeing what other organizations have done and asking them for feedback, asking them what their experience was and what some best practices might look like. So really looking forward to kind of watching this evolve as it will over time, and helping connect some dots for organizations that are at the, the very beginning phases of their journey towards monetizing some of their virtual programs, their virtual experiences and offering. So, overall, the fact that you're here today shows that you're taking proactive steps in preparing your museum and preparing yourself and thinking through this really, challenging moment that we're in right now. There are no right or wrong answers. We're all experimenting. We're all trying to figure out what works for our communities, what works for our organizations. And it's a really, a really interesting time for that type of culture of experimentation and iteration. So, there's lots to be done and a lots to be tried and a lots to be learned. And I thank everybody for the ideas that they've put forth and for joining us today. So in these last couple of moments, I want to ask each of our amazing guest speakers to leave us with one idea that we can bring back to our organizations during this time. So Emily, let's start with you. What's one big idea that we can bring back to our organizations right now?
For us, I think just don't be scared to try something out. If it doesn't work, you're not losing too much. Just try it out. I think your audience will be appreciative of the effort, and it'll continue to build good rapport in your community.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you. And Sharon, what's one big idea that you would leave with all of us today?
The same, like, don't be afraid to jump in there with children, because we have kindergartners who are loving Zoom classes.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Katie, what's one big idea that you would want to share with the entire museum and cultural community right now?
I think, from our experience, it's don't be afraid to lean into the difference between the virtual programming that you're mounting and what your donors are used to kind of experiencing. In our experience, sharing with our donors that we intended to create a program that would reach thousands of people was compelling to them, was a reason to honor their gift, was a reason to support the museum and the gala. So don't shy away from leaning into how very different it is.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Katie. And McKenna, one big idea that you would leave with everybody today?
It'd probably be find ways to build that one-on-one connection with people, because we are able to reach people through Zoom or through Cameo. You can build that stronger one-on-one connection, and they can feel a lot more connected to you.
Thank you. Thank you. And Joshua, one big idea to leave with us all today?
I mean, I guess I echo everybody. There's been a lot of brilliant things that have come out of very dark times. And this is another, bad time that we're all experiencing. And I don't mean to say that we haven't been busy. I mean, we've been more busy than we've ever been in the full time that I've ever been at the zoo. But I think the biggest thing that I've learned through the virtual programs is, and what I'm trying to convey to our marketing team and our staff as well, is that going virtual now allows us to expand past our borders, right? So now we're not just strictly focused in the local communities. We're not producing an event for the tourists that are coming into town or for the local people. Now we have those people on our list in our database. Now that we're doing these virtual experiences, we can get people connected all over the world and get them interested in our mission and our conservation and our education efforts that affect not just Chicago, but the world. And I think that's something that is extremely powerful. Again, it lasts a lot longer than just the borders of your own institution.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And Kara, how about you? One big idea for everybody to bring back to their organizations?
I think have fun with it. I think people are looking for lighthearted moments in all this. So at least we try to not take ourselves too seriously and make it into some formal lecture or, really highly scientific, high-powered talk or of some sort, but to just kind of tap into the fun of our staff and our content and our exhibitions, and feel creative and just offer up learning opportunities, nerd outs, you know, excuses for families to get together on the couch and hook up their computers and watch our vertebrate paleontologists talk about Jurassic Park. So I would say have a lot of fun with it.
Excellent, excellent. Well, thank you, Kara, Joshua, Katie, Emily, Sharon, and McKenna. I'm really inspired and energized by hearing all of the work that you and your organizations are doing right now in the cultural sector, looking for new avenues to engage your audience, looking for new ways to generate revenue, to generate impact, and to connect with people in a really inspiring and interesting way. The world needs your organizations and needs museums and zoos and aquariums and places of arts and culture more than they ever have. So I really, you know, my hat's off to each and every one of you for the great work that you guys are doing. And I hope you're staying safe. I hope that everybody's healthy and happy and you know, making the most of these really unprecedented moments in time. And again, thank each and every one of you and our attendees from all around the globe for joining us today. I know that this conversation and conversations like it lead to really interesting creative outcomes, and that type of inspiration is really a special thing to share across the cultural sector globally. So thanks everybody for participating in the conversation today. I really, you know, was really excited to bring this conversation to fruition, and until next time, thanks again.